It's a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am going to talk Kevin Durant being traded to the Houston Rockets, involving an old friend of Memphis, NBA draft diamond picking, looking for some diamonds in the rough. And I'm also going to weigh in on something that was a hot topic out of the Tyrese Haliburton injury. Conversations about shortening the NBA season. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Monday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode. Thank you so much for being with me wherever you are checking out the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can get Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you for making DeMichael and I a part of your everyday NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption. DeMichael Cole, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, my wonderful co-host, not with me on this episode, coming back from vacation, but he will be back around for our Tuesday edition of the show. Again, hopefully you're an everydayer already, checking out the show every time an episode drops. Obviously, there was no episode on Friday. I apologize for that. I know we had some folks in the comments. Didn't address it there. I addressed it on social media. I had a death in the family. My grandmother passed away on Thursday evening. DeMichael obviously had his vacation already planned. Wasn't able to get a Friday episode. Lots of kind comments on social media. Thank you to everybody that did that. Life happens, right? And I am happy to be back with you here on this Monday edition of the show, talking Memphis Grizzlies basketball. And I promise you, although in our rundown there, it may look like there isn't as much Grizzlies basketball, we're going to make it work in every single segment, I promise. And we're going to lead off with Kevin Durant being traded to the Houston Rockets for a package that perhaps would make Desmond Bane blush, right? I think that's something interesting that really is fascinating when you look at how this played out with Kevin Durant officially. Well, not officially. It can't happen officially until July 6th for financial reasons. But Kevin Durant being moved to the Rockets, and again, this is per Shams of ESPN, at Shams Charania on X. Kevin Durant is going to Houston. Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the number 10 pick in the NBA draft, and 5 second-round selections going back to the Phoenix Suns. Now, obviously, an easy way to connect this to the Memphis Grizzlies is the fact that Memphis now has to deal with Kevin Durant 4 times this coming season, and that is going to be a challenge. Kevin Durant, even in his current veteran state, in the twilight of his NBA career, probably one of the top 10 or so players in the National Basketball Association. He's certainly one of the best scorers in the NBA to this day. Guy gets buckets, can score at every conceivable angle and position. When he puts the ball up in the air, you think it is going through the tin. But I do think this is interesting from a couple of angles. One, DeMichael and I have talked on this podcast, about how there isn't necessarily an equivalency between what Desmond Bane garnered in a trade and what Kevin Durant was going to get in a trade, right? The idea, KD is going to get 7 first-round picks. Not necessarily. Context matters. Desmond Bane is under contract for the next several years. Kevin Durant could very well be a free agent. He has a player option coming up after this coming season. And while he may well re-sign with Houston, that is still going to be a pretty big contract for a player that is closer to 40 years old than he is to 30 years old. So that is a consideration that Houston is going to have to make, or had to make, in the midst of making this trade. Houston also has to weigh the reality that Kevin Durant is not a small forward any longer. He has not played, according to Basketball Reference, a majority of his minutes at the 3 spot since he was on the Golden State Warriors almost a decade ago, about 8 years ago now. So you're looking at a KD that's essentially a big at this point, a stretch 4 that can play the 5. And again, not trying to make it seem like that Kevin Durant doesn't have value, because he most certainly does. But that Kevin Durant comes with limitations that didn't exist 10 years prior. And that is where you get a package like this. Jalen Green could very well be a splashy, impressive scoring guard next to Devin Booker. But Jalen Green is extremely inconsistent, somebody that has been a frustration point for Houston Rockets fans multiple times over the last several seasons. Dillon Brooks, we know very well here in Memphis, right? We know that Dillon Brooks has his strengths and his weaknesses. He is a potential all NBA defensive caliber wing. We talk about the Grizzlies needing dogs, right? We talk about that need, and some folks in Grizzlies Twitter and in Grizzlies content creation will talk about how the team hasn't been the same since Dillon Brooks and Steven Adams moved on from the squad. Bringing Dillon Brooks into Phoenix to be that wing defender could certainly help. But the fact that a player like Kevin Durant, first ballot Hall of Famer, potentially one of the top 15 or so players, not just now, but of all time in the National Basketball Association, getting this kind of package has to sting for the Houston Rockets, or excuse me, for the Phoenix Suns. The Houston Rockets should be over the moon because they keep all their young talents that they truly are invested in. It allows for a Reed Shepherd to have a larger role with Jalen Green gone. It allows for a Cam Whitmore to have a larger role. The Rockets can reload this fairly easily. They weren't going to play the number 10 pick in the NBA draft this coming season, and they're trying to be contenders now. In all reality, they're doing the kind of trade that the Memphis Grizzlies should have done a few years ago when they were in the exact same seat that the Rockets currently fill as the reigning number 2 seed in the Western Conference. It's relevant for Memphis because Phoenix has the potential to be a really bad basketball team this coming season. And remember, coming out of that Desmond Bane trade, Memphis has the better of the Washington and Phoenix first-round picks coming to the Grizzlies. So, Washington, almost certainly not going to be a good basketball team this coming season, although the Eastern Conference gets weaker and weaker by the day. We'll talk more about that later on in the show. But Washington is probably not going to be good. And there's growing evidence, depending on how the rest of the offseason plays out, that Phoenix is not going to be particularly good. And if that does become reality, and we're looking at two teams that could be lottery squads, the Grizzlies could have a pretty impressive trade asset leading up to the trade deadline, because we'll have a good idea of who's good and who's bad by February, or in the lead up to the 2026 NBA draft. That is an asset to keep an eye on, even more so now after this deal. Nobody rationally is going to say the Phoenix Suns are better this coming season after the Kevin Durant trade. And that helps Memphis with the asset that they have. Doesn't help Memphis in the short term because they have to contend with the Houston Rockets team that now has KD, an extremely viable offensive weapon, and a player at 6'11", an underrated defender in that weak side help defensive spot, very similar to what Jaren Jackson Jr. has done in the past for the Memphis Grizzlies. KD is not Jaren, but KD can do similar things. KD has the capacity to block shots and be a good rim protector. And you got Ime Udoka, who is going to have a really strong defensive scheme. We've seen that in action. The Rockets didn't give up any significant pieces of their future, both in the here and now, because again, the number 10 pick wasn't going to play, or down the road because the rest of the assets are second rounders. And they just acquired Kevin Durant. They certainly logically think they can replace Jalen Green. They think that they can fill the void of Dillon Brooks. This is a dynamite trade for the Houston Rockets, and that obviously impacts Memphis because the Grizzlies have to deal with Houston more than they have to deal with any other team aside from San Antonio, Dallas, New Orleans. The Grizzlies now have to contend with almost certainly Cooper Flagg, and we'll find that out for certain here in a couple of days with the NBA draft coming up. Victor Wembanyama, Kevin Durant. The Grizzlies could potentially see those guys for 12 of their 82 games coming up this season. That is a staggering reality if you're a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies. Of course, Flagg is going to be a rookie. Kyrie Irving for the Magic out due to injury. It's not all lost, of course. But the future of the Southwest Division looks very complicated. And the Memphis Grizzlies, of course, hoping to be a part of that, making it one of the more challenging divisions in the NBA. They're going to try to keep retooling as the offseason progresses, and this should be a big week for that, to be honest with you. Speaking of that, when we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to look at the NBA draft, some diamonds in the rough, some players that in my early perusing of draft analysis, watching my own bits of tape here and there, I really like going into this draft. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by OLIPOP. Here I go. I already popped it, if I'm being honest, because I was a little bit thirsty early, but I will take a sip. Ah, that's another crisp apple right there. I love me some OLIPOP. And if you haven't given them a look yet, you most certainly need to do so. It's a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda, but want something that supports their health. 2 to 5 grams of sugar, 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can. OLIPOP is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. 39 grams of sugar in a regular Coke, 44 grams in an orange Fanta. That's way too much. OLIPOP flips that script. A fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It is soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. And I got to tell you, on these hot summer days, it really is refreshing, helping you get a third, roughly, of your daily recommended fiber without all that sugar. You can get a free can of OLIPOP just like me. Buy any 2 cans in store, and they'll reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA to claim your free can and find OLIPOP near you. That's drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. Go and check them out. The NBA draft begins on Wednesday. Remember, it is a 2-night event. Wednesday night, they have the first round. Thursday night, the second round. And we'll have DeMichael for the next couple of shows. Tuesday and Wednesday is the plan. But Thursday, Friday, we're probably not going to have DeMichael because DeMichael has to cover the team for the commercial appeal, and DeMichael will be meeting with Zach Kleiman both nights, right? That's one of the positives of this new draft structure is it makes Zach Kleiman a little more available than he normally is. That's the Grizzlies GM. So DeMichael will be doing that line of work. I'll probably be taking you through draft night and beyond to close out the week here. But I am intrigued by a few names coming up in this NBA draft diamond picking process. So these are guys that would currently, and again, remember, I'm a big tankathon guy, right? These are guys that would currently be below where the Grizzlies are slated to pick in their selections. And I want to remind you, if you don't remember, the Memphis Grizzlies now have the 16th overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft coming out of the Desmond Bane trade. Memphis has the 16th, 48th, and 56th pick in the upcoming draft. So I've got a few names here that I really like. The first name is one that DeMichael and I have talked about on recent episodes of the show, and it's Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joe's in Philadelphia. This is a guy who has 6'9.5", 7'5" wingspan, projected to go 20th according to Tankathon to Miami. On the big board, he is 19th for Tankathon, so right there in that frame of range and reference where the Grizzlies could get this guy. And his length, his size, his athleticism, his capacity to shoot the 3 ball, Tankathon projects him as a 36% roughly 3-point shooter in the NBA. His measurables are through the roof. He's elite in so many different spaces, like the shuttle run. Again, we mentioned the wingspan, a 9'1" standing reach. This is somebody that checks a lot of boxes in terms of being an elite potential NBA defender. You want that switchability. You want that capacity to be malleable, not just someone who defends bigs, but someone that can defend on the perimeter. I think that this guy can do that for stretches. A 3-and-D combo forward. Memphis desperately could use one of those that could be a producer in the here and now. He's young, just recently turned 20, but I do think that, he's turning 21 coming up here in July. Misread that, my mistake. So turning 21 soon. That matters a lot in terms of, is this guy actually going to be a contributor? The Grizzlies have talked about getting dogs that are older, more veteran presence. Condavious Caldwell-Pope is a great example of that from the Bane trade. If they do make a selection here, very possible they make a trade. We'll talk more about that on tomorrow's show. But if they do make a selection here, I think that Rasheer Fleming makes a heck of a lot of sense. Let's say the Grizzlies trade up. Okay, they have lots of assets now that they can move up for somebody. Let's say that they want to trade up into this draft. Late first, early second round. Somebody that I really, really like is Cam Jones out of Marquette. And if you're watching this and thinking, Cam Jones, where have I heard that name before? Cam Jones. Cam Jones is from hometown Memphis, Tennessee, Evangelical Christian School, ECS, stand up. That is Cam Jones. Yes, that Cam Jones. He is projected by Tankathon to be taken 30th in the first round, by the Los Angeles Clippers. On the big board for Tankathon, he is 32nd. I love this guy. Why do I love him? Because he is a good facilitator and protector of the basketball. If you are an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, you know all too well how much I value protecting the ball and limiting turnovers. I thought that was a major issue for Memphis the last couple of years. In my opinion, it's one of the main reasons why Taylor Jenkins is no longer the head basketball coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. This is significant, being able to create offense for others while protecting the ball yourself. Here is what Cam Jones at Marquette did this past season. Almost 6 assists per game per 36 minutes. He was at 6.3 assists, 2 turnovers. So that is a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. That is excellent for somebody that is 6'4.5", playing a combo guard sort of position. I'm not saying Cam Jones comes in and starts. I'm not saying he comes in and he is immediately somebody that is in the rotation. But if you want somebody to get some reps in the G League, again, he's older, right? Cam Jones, 23 years old. He's an older guy, but this is someone that could be an end of rotation, G League, two-way contract type that can defend, that can score, that has the capacity through his experience to be a contributor now, all right? He's not going to light the world on fire from 3. This isn't somebody that you're really looking at and saying that's a future starter in the NBA. But we're looking for dogs, right? And we're looking for guys that can create offensive opportunity without taking it away in the form of turnovers. That is something that I am most passionate about. Not just saying it because Cam Jones is a Memphian born and bred. I am saying it because Cam Jones can help the Grizzlies in an area of drastic need, at least drastic need, in my opinion. And then last but not least, I'm going to sound like a homer here for a couple of reasons. This is a deep cut. All right. This is if the Grizzlies are picking at 56th overall. This is an undrafted signing, perhaps. And this is someone that Vince Williams Jr. might be buddies with. This is a guy who played for VCU this past season, Max Shulga. Okay. Ukraine stand up. Born in Kiev, Ukraine. This is an international player that came over to the United States and was a producer at a high level for VCU this past season. Why do I like this guy? Another assist to turnover ratio guy, 4.4 assists to 1.9 turnovers, so 2-to-1, not quite as good as Jones. But this is somebody who, again, advanced stats love. Win shares per 40 minutes, he's elite. Offensive rating, he's elite. He projects to be a 37% three-point shooter roughly, according to Tankathon. And here's something that he's really good at for all those folks that love John Conchar so much. This is one of the better rebounding guard prospects in this draft. So he's old, again, similar to Cam. He's going to be this week. Happy early birthday to Max. He turns 23. Older prospect, but this is somebody that can come in and rebound effectively, can defend within team schemes effectively, protects the ball, gets to the free throw line, and he helped win basketball games at VCU. That is important. Don't sleep on that capacity. He's not going to jump off the page in terms of wingspan. He's not going to do a bunch of things, even necessarily in the tape that I've watched of him, that is really going to stand out and make you think this is an NBA surefire rotation player. But he's a competitor. He is going to fight for the ball. He is going to make good decisions with the ball in his hand. He likes to take the three-point shot. He shoots a lot of threes, 5.3 shots per game from beyond the arc and 33 roughly minutes played per game. He takes shots. He generates rebounds. He creates assists. He also averaged almost 2 steals a game for VCU. So he's a good aggressive defender, can play passing lanes. This is somebody, again, we're talking diamonds in the rough here, somebody off the beaten path. So let me know on X how you're feeling. Are you with us on Rasheer Fleming? DeMichael and I both like him. To credit DeMichael, my co-host, he brought up Fleming first. And I liked Fleming, but after doing a deeper dive, after hearing DeMichael talk about him, I really like him. Cam Jones, Memphis stand up. Love how he creates offense without having turnovers. And then again, my real deep cut from Ukraine, from VCU, Max Shulga. How do you feel about these names? Are there any other deep dives, diamonds in the rough, perhaps, that you would like to hear us talk about? Maybe other types of prospects in general, what you look for in the NBA draft. And then, again, maybe going into tomorrow's show, we'll talk about the idea of trading that number 16 pick, where you think that could go. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode talking about NBA injuries and all that jazz. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where all your money went between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's pretty easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. It was entirely too much. Now I can budget much more smartly and save more money. Smartly? Is that a word? I budget smarter. Let's say it that way. Plus, with my wonderful wife, I can manage money very smoothly, tracking shared and personal accounts, setting goals, and staying on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, so as I tend to do, generated a little bit of a firestorm on social media during the NBA Finals game. And I do enjoy the NBA Finals. I want to stress that. I like it. I am a big supporter of player safety. I want to start off with that because I worry that in my conversations on social media that got lost a little bit. Obviously, I do not want players to get hurt, right? I don't want them to be in a position where they're losing their livelihoods. And to see Tyrese Haliburton, we'll talk more about the actual end of the NBA Finals, Thunder, Pacers, all that stuff. Talk more about that when DeMichael comes back. I want to save the championship conversation. And obviously the result was directly impacted by Tyrese Haliburton, likely Achilles injury. Terrible tear. Playing on a strained calf, should he have been out there, all those sorts of things. And naturally, the conversation turns to limiting the season, right? Eliminating games. And I just casually pointed out that that's all well and good to say, but these teams and these players are not going to want to lose ticket and television revenue. It's not going to happen. It is a fallacy to think that a millionaire or a billionaire is going to sit in a negotiation situation and talk about how they can make less money. In a perfect world, could we come up with a system where NBA players are playing less games and still making the amount of monopoly money that they are? Absolutely. But that's not the world we reside in. This is a space where part of the reason that these players get paid the money that they do is the content creation that occurs from these leagues. It's entertainment, right? You watching this podcast right now, which, quick sidebar, thank you so much for watching, listening, wherever you check out these podcasts. Whether you're watching or listening, you are checking out this podcast for some extent or to some extent for entertainment purposes, right? Informational, want to hear somebody's take that's loud and obnoxious about the Grizzlies, whatever the case might be. That's why you're here, right? Every day, hopefully. Me, DeMichael, you're entertained, hopefully, right? If I or DeMichael were to produce, I don't know, let's say 10% fewer episodes of Locked On Grizzlies, because technically we're your team every day, right? But great example, this past Friday, there was no show. So if we produce 10% fewer shows, would it be realistic to go to my bosses and say, I'm still going to make the same amount of money, right? Because with 10% fewer shows, there's likely, not always, but likely, fewer opportunities for ad revenue, fewer opportunities for downloads and streams and views. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. I'm trying to make that connection in comparison to the NBA. Go up to a guy making $20 million a year, okay? Jaren Jackson Jr. this coming season makes almost that much, a little bit more. Go up to him and say, okay, we have a great idea. You guys are going to play 10 less games this coming season. 72 games, no back-to-backs. You're going to have longer stretches of time off. It's going to be awesome. We figured it out. The only catch is you are now making 10% less of your contract. So let's stick with the $20 million because I'm not a math teacher. You're now making $18 million instead of $20 million. Now that sounds like chump change to somebody making that much money, right? But you have to keep in mind that these athletes have a finite amount of time to maximize their financial wealth in this ridiculous society that we all live in, where we prioritize thousands upon thousands of people in an arena and millions around the country watching a bunch of grown men and women, depending on the league, put a ball into a hoop. That's literally what we watch. Is there more context than that? Of course there is. But that is what our society is. The money is invested where we think the most value comes. And sports are a space where there's a lot of investment. But when there's fewer opportunities for that investment, there's naturally going to be less money. If you're okay with that, great. I promise you that the millionaires are going to have some concerns. And then to be honest with you, beyond, let's say Jaren Jackson Jr. is cool with it because it's $2 million, whatever. What about the guy making the vet minimum? What about that guy? 10% of $1.4 million. That is not chump change to somebody that's on the tail end of their career or somebody that is holding on for dear life in the National Basketball Association. That matters. So what is the structure of that? And if you truly believe that the billionaires that are the owners / governors of these NBA franchises seeking expansion to 32 teams, have you watched the Washington Wizards play? Did you watch the Charlotte Hornets this past season? These teams that lost an absurd amount of basketball games? You're telling me that there's enough talent to have 2 whole new franchises with 17 other players, 35, including 2-way contracts, 35 more NBA players. You're saying that's going to be good for the product? It'll be good for the league. And there's a difference. There is a difference. So, gee, gosh, golly, I want everybody to be healthy and safe, and let's keep this thing going, man. No injuries. That's not how this works. And if you really want to be mad at something, back-to-back, sure, I can hear that. Expand the schedule a little bit, get rid of back-to-backs. I'm with you. This past weekend, I can assure you that across this country, there were high school athletes, elite basketball prospects, and just basketball players in general, because not everybody's an elite prospect, right? Playing 5 or so basketball games for their AAU and travel teams in the span of one weekend. That's 5 basketball games in, say, 2 days, 48 hours. Sponsored by companies that have vested stakes, not just in colleges, but in high schools, high school programs, and high school coaches. Where does the trickle down stop if you limit the scope of the league's content creation? You're talking about fewer games for arena workers to work. You're talking about fewer games for advertisers locally, depending on the contract that an individual franchise, like the Memphis Grizzlies. Teams like the Memphis Grizzlies would be hurt the most by this because revenue sharing would go down. Teams like the Memphis Grizzlies would be hurt the most by this. And economies, that's multiple fewer home games for people to go to restaurants and go to bars and frequent establishments in the Memphis area. Less opportunities for people to go to hotels. So, again, it's terrible what happened to Tyrese Haliburton. I like John Morant better than Tyrese Haliburton, but I would never wish that injury on Tyrese Haliburton. That's terrible. And that hurts the Indiana Pacers' whole entire next season. But saying that the season should be shortened, that's not a realistic expectation unless you can convince a bunch of millionaires and billionaires that they would be better off with 10% less money than they currently have. Quality over quantity, the NFL is trying to go to 18 games. Major League Baseball plays 162. The NHL, which is a much more violent sport than the NBA, plays the exact same amount of games. At some point, it ain't the amount of games that are being played. How they're distributed? We can talk about that. But limiting that, how are you making up that money? Maybe expansion is the answer, because money obviously comes from expansion. That would be a conversation that I'd be happy to have. But just saying to eliminate games, nah, that's not realistic. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax how you're feeling about all that. And again, wishing well to Tyrese Haliburton. Hope he gets better. On our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, again, DeMichael Cole will be back with me. We'll talk about the NBA Finals wrapping up. We'll talk about potential trades in the NBA draft coming up this Wednesday and Thursday. All sorts of different angles we can take there. Make sure you're with DeMichael and I on that Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. And speaking of Locked On Grizzlies, now that we have been your first listen today, for your second listen, check out the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft. It's a 5-episode series with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts, college experts, and NBA draft experts. Find the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for being with me on this edition of the show. Thank you for liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere and everywhere you get a podcast. Michael and I are so grateful that you're hopefully with us each and every time that episode drops. I will see you back here tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, enjoy yourselves, spend some time talking and showing love to loved ones, and I'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.